I'm in the wind now. I'm sure I'll be dead by tomorrow, but I need to let people know this thing is loose. I'm an agent with the United States government, and my station is Black Site number 7. I won't tell you my name. It wouldn't matter much anyway, but this was not how I saw my life going. I spent 6 years in Iraq, signed up right after high school. It was nothing like the recruiter told me it would be. I spent 8 hours in the blistering heat. I hauled my fair share of comrades out of firefights, and I saw a lot of crap out there that would make an ordinary person go crazier than I might be. I've had a camel spider crawl on me while I sleep. I watched friends I've known since basic get decapitated through binoculars, burned houses full of insurgents and civilians to rubble, and a lot of other things I really don't like to talk about. When I was done, they gave me my papers, thanked me for my service, and sent me home. I know I have no right to complain. Many guys didn't make it back, but home was worse. I'd spent 6 years in an active combat zone, and now I was just, supposed to come home and go back to civilian life? I spent 3 months in the civilian world. 2 of those months were spent in crappy apartments because my parents couldn't handle the night terrors and the jumpy Marine that their son had become. Every car horn, every barking dog, every firework rattling in the street had me reaching for my gun or breaking into a cold sweat when I couldn't find it. Before TJ found me, I was honestly considering killing myself. Then one day, he was just at my door with that big shit-eating grin he'd always worn in the desert. "You look like hell, Hoss. Let me get you some pancakes. I got something I want to discuss with you." TJ was my platoon leader in the sandbox. They called him the comedian because he was always smiling, always cracking jokes. He was a functional sociopath. I guess most of us were. I always admired his ability to laugh in the face of the messed up stuff we did. TJ is not his real name, clearly, but since he's still in this crap and I've left it behind, I figure the best I can do is not remind them that he's why I'm here. So he took me to breakfast. In the back of a crowded Denny's, he laid it all out for me. "You got it bad, Hoss, but that's okay, 'cause old Uncle TJ has the cure for you. Got a new job, familiar work that might interest you. Ever hear of Two Trees?" As it happened, I had. Two Trees was a government institute that, on the surface, did a lot of medical research and clinical trials. Underneath, though, they did wet work, and anyone who was involved in covert ops knew about Two Trees. We'd worked with them a few times in Iraq, and their guys were spooky, to say the least. "You're looking at the new head of Black Site number 7. I furrowed my brow at him. "Congrats. Should I know what that is?" "Of course not. It's a closely guarded government secret. Two Trees is paying me a small fortune to keep it that way. Problem is, I need someone to curate the site for me. Someone with military training, experience with firearms, and a need for some normalcy. Know anyone that might fit that bill, Hoss?" I knew what he was asking, but I didn't think I was the one he was looking for. I hadn't found work in 3 months since I'd been back, and most of that was because I couldn't settle into anything. I was constantly jumpy, constantly on edge, and that makes it hard to find work. No one wanted you doing security work or minding a gas station when every backfiring car was an enemy combatant. What would happen if I had an episode in a government facility of all places? I shook my head. "Thanks, but no thanks. I don't think I'm fit for duty the way I am." "Yeah, I thought you might say that." He pulled a metal tin out of his front pocket and slid it across the table. "Your medical file reads like a bench work for PTSD. Night terrors, irritability, being on edge, those irrational bouts of anger that got you thrown out of your parents' house." I felt defensive. "How did you know about that?" "You'd be surprised what my level of clearance will get you. The therapist records were about as hard to get as a beer at a gas station. Well, I got a little present for you, Hoss. Welcome to the rest of your life," he said, tapping the outside of the silver case. The case was about as big as an Altoids tin. There were no markings on it, no filigrees or needless ornaments, and it had the distinctly surgical look that you usually see with military tech. I slid my hand towards it, but I didn't seem to want to touch it. Every sense I had told me to walk away right now, not to touch that thing, and just walk away from this unassuming little case. I forced my hands to pop it open instead. Inside was a pair of gray gel caps. "What are these?" "These are the answer to your prayers. 2 of these a day will make you feel as calm and clear as you did when you were a lad of 18. No more jumping at every noise. No more reaching for your gun when a dog barks or a car backfires. Just peace of mind." Looking back, that's probably what Mephistopheles said when he spoke to Faust. What's the catch? These pills are only available through the Two Trees Corporation. Employees who agree to be part of the clinical trials get them free of charge. But they're only available to employees, he said, with a little grin. Take them. Take a day to feel the effects, and let me know what you think. Call me tomorrow and give me your answer. Enjoy a night of freedom, then make your decision. I took the pills home with me, and after a few hours of staring at them, I took them with some vodka. The effects were sudden and immediate. If you've never had PTSD, then it's hard to explain, but it's like having a loose wire and someone suddenly fixes it. Then you go back to the way you used to be. My anxiety just melted away. My fear dissipated. My unease and dread were gone, and my anger seemed like a distant memory. I was sitting in my crappy apartment, surrounded by the trappings of my depression and my anxiety, and suddenly, I felt like I had before I boarded that bus in 2003 and headed out to basic training. I was finally comfortable in my own head. It was like coming back to a safe place after years of running from danger. After the first good night's sleep I'd had since shipping out, I called TJ and told him I was in. One question, I asked. What's in the pills that makes them work so well? He was silent for a long minute, and then finally he said, You really don't want to know, Hoss. Pack your stuff. There will be a moving truck to take you to West Virginia in the morning. And that is how I came to work at Black Site number 7. I must have looked like a junkie by the time I pulled up in front of my new house. I didn't have much. The truck had taken all 4 boxes into the deep woods as I followed in my old compact. The journey took me about 16 hours, and by the time I got there, I was starting to feel the anxiety creep back in. I became angry at how slow the truck was going, afraid that this whole thing was a trick and they would kill me. By the time I arrived, I found myself wanting to die, hoping for death, so I could return to the quiet that had been in my head before. That was when I saw TJ standing at the gate of what looked like an old military checkpoint. He flashed that knowing smile and handed me another silver case. I dry swallowed the pills without a word and felt the inner peace worming its way back into my brain. Then he showed me to my new quarters. It was a little bunk room with a bed, a kitchenette, and a locker for my clothes. There was a foot locker for my personal stuff, and I was told to keep the place clean. I would be responsible for the site and its security. TJ showed me a terminal off the bedroom for monitoring and camera feeds. The compound had cameras all over the place, but I appeared to be the only person here full-time. Site's mostly for storage these days, but it's what we get up to here at night that may interest you. That's why you're here. I need someone I can trust to watch this site 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 4 times a year, you'll be relieved for a week of R&R somewhere. But other than that, this is your world, Hoss. That didn't bother me. I had no problem being alone after 3 months of people. What I was curious about was what I would be doing out here. What am I looking at exactly? TJ pointed at the 3 buildings on the camera. Truck comes twice a week. Let them through the gate and don't bother them. They'll take what they need from the building and won't bother you either. Keep nosy people out. Lethal force is authorized, and don't ever go in there, or I'll have to show you where Black Site 8 is, he said with a smile. The smile didn't make it to his eyes. Don't worry about being vigilant, though. If anything bigger than a mouse moves out there, the alarms will let you know about it right away. He told me that my food would be delivered once a week, mostly MREs, and I could order anything I wanted from the terminal in the living room. There was a workout yard near the second building, and I could move through the woods if I chose, as long as I took my phone with me so I could get alerts from the console. By the way, hand me your phone, he said. When I did, he put it in his pocket and handed me a new one. That's your new phone. I'll take the keys to your car, too, and put the money in your account. This is your life now, Hoss, so don't take this job lightly. If you leave the grounds, we'll know. If you try to update social media or try to tell anyone on the outside about what you've seen here, we'll know. If you want to get married or feel like you need out, arrangements can be made after your first 5-year tour. As far as anyone is concerned, you no longer exist. Don't be stupid. Put in your 5 years, and we'll reassess your position then. He grinned again and punched me in the arm. And lighten up. This will be the easiest 5 years of your life. From that point on, I was an employee of Two Trees. TJ had been right. The first 5 years flew by. I lived on the site, spending my days working out or watching TV. I played the latest video games and watched the newest movies. Twice a week, as advertised, a truck rolled up and honked. I would check the cameras, open the gates, and they would do the rest. They would honk when they were ready to leave, and I left them alone. The trucks always had the Two Trees logo on them, and they never popped in to give me any crap, and I never went out to give them any. I never tried to get into the warehouses. I'd been a soldier long enough to know how to check my curiosity, and the scares were minimal. The food kept coming, the pills kept coming, and kept me in the right mind, too, and it was pretty peaceful, all told. The alarms, to my knowledge, only went off 3 times in that first year. 2 of those times, it was a deer who had wandered too close. The first time it happened, I had slunk out in a panic, service pistol in hand and boxer shorts flapping. As I rounded the first warehouse, I drew down on a very surprised doe who darted away before I could draw a bead on her. It was kind of a special moment for me. I had never seen a deer up close, and as it ran away, I was glad I hadn't shot it. The third time the alarm went off, it was a person, though. It was the first person I'd seen in 3 months. I'd been sitting at the console one night watching the latest Marvel Avengers movie. I think it might have been Infinity Wars, when the alarm went off. I paused the movie, expecting to see a deer or a rabbit on the monitor. My eyes went wide, though, when I realized it was a person. He had a crowbar. He was attempting to pry the door open. He must have come out of the woods, because if he had driven up, I would have known about it sooner. It had been 3 months since I'd seen another person. The last one had been Agent Daughtry, who'd come to relieve me for a week of R&R in September. The idea of seeing a person not connected with Two Trees made me feel weird. Even when you were on R&R, you went to a company resort or a company place full of company people. This stopped you from getting a little too drunk and talking about all the stuff you did for your country. It was a great idea, but it meant you had nearly no interaction with civilians. I took my pistol out and crept up on him in near silence. When my foot came down on an extra crunchy stick, he turned his head and noticed me. He raised the crowbar as if to attack, and the rest was instinct. The gun went off without me having even spoken to him, reflexes taking over and dropping the threat before it could become a real danger. His left eye popped like an overripe fruit, and he fell down on the hard December ground. I called TJ, and he and some of the other men in suits came to assess the damage. "You did just right, Hoss. He was a threat to the facility and needed to be put down. Don't think for a minute that this reflects poorly on you." "What will you do with him?" I asked. TJ smiled. "Immediate disposal, Hoss. Think you got the stomach to help us?" I found that I did, and once he was doused in gasoline, we set him ablaze at the edge of the property. They gave me a week of R&R for that, and when I came back, TJ must have decided that I was worthy of being brought in on certain things. The alarm went off about a week after I'd come back from R&R, and I saw a black car rolling up the front gate. TJ stepped out of it and waved as it stopped in the concrete roundabout, other men getting out as well. I slid my shoulder holster on and went out to meet him. It was 11 p.m., and a visit this late was highly irregular. As I approached the vehicle, 2 guys in suits were bringing a man with a bag on his head out of the car. He was wearing scrubs, his hands bound behind his back, and I could hear him crying beneath the black hood he wore. I looked between them, waiting for an explanation, and TJ threw an arm around me and walked me towards the spot where we had burnt the trespasser. "Hoss, I think it's time that we bring you in on the second reason for black sites. You see, sometimes Two Trees has assets that need to be eliminated. The black sites are often used for this purpose. It's always the responsibility of the site's caretaker to carry out the elimination. Fringe benefits, I suppose you could say." "Why wasn't I told this before?" I asked, feeling indignant. "I'm no murderer." "Oh, well, those combatants in Iraq will be glad to hear that, won't they?" he said almost snidely. "That was war, TJ. This is murder. Think of this as war too, Hoss. These people are enemies, and they need to be eliminated for the good of the public safety. It's part of the job, Hoss, a part I know firsthand that you're capable of." They put the man on his knees in the middle of the burn spot, and I could hear him praying under that hood as we stood around him. "Put him down, Hoss. That's an order," TJ said. "And if I won't?" I said, looking at him icily. The 2 men on either side drew their guns, and TJ grinned. "Then I'm afraid that these men will have to execute both of you. Come on, Hoss. Don't throw this away over some nobody. He's no different than the man outside the warehouse." Looking back, I kinda just wish I'd let them shoot me. But I guess if I had, you'd never know about any of this. Instead, I drew out my gun and put a bullet in his skull, glowering at TJ as his buddies put their guns away. "You made the right choice, Hoss. Who knows, you might not have to do this more than a dozen times in the next 4 years." On that note, he was wrong. I executed an asset a month after that. They were mostly people in scrubs, people in lab coats, doctors, researchers, people who had likely tried to steal from whatever facility they worked at. They were men, women, old men, and scared 20-somethings, I never bothered to learn their names. They were just assets that needed to be eliminated. I became kind of numb to the process. We burned them afterwards. Gasoline and fire made it like they were never there. The spot near the edge had a charred look to it for a while after that. At the end of 5 years, TJ came to see me and asked if I wanted to re-up. What happens if I walk away? I asked. I was eating dinner when he came by, and he had sat down to have a plate of fettuccine with me. Given my free time, I had learned to do a good number of things that I couldn't before. I became a pretty good cook. I learned to play the guitar, read every book on the shelf I had bought to hold them, and there was a chainsaw out back along with some sculptures I had made with it. I couldn't say I hadn't enjoyed my time here, the killings aside, but I was curious to know if they'd actually let me leave. You'll be allowed to return to the real world, your bank account fuller and your retirement substantial. Just watch what you say out there. I'd hate to have to bring you back for your replacement to put a bullet in. I ended up signing up for another 4 years. I shouldn't have done that. I was 8 years deep when they brought the girl in the black bag to me. It was 2 a.m., and I had started to think about going to bed when the alarm went off. I saw the town car rolling up and looked for TJ. He was not the one that climbed out, however. This guy had his hair slicked back, his suit a perfect blue pinstripe. He didn't wave at me, and I felt a sense of dread as I grabbed my gun. Somehow I expected TJ to be under that bag this time. The man's name was Stein, and luckily he did not have TJ under that bag. What he did have was a kid with a thick black bag over their head. I couldn't tell at first if it was a boy or a girl. They were dressed in baggy clothes, Salvation Army rags that a homeless guy would be embarrassed to wear, and they were crying loudly under their hood. 2 familiar men had the kid, and they both looked stoic about the whole matter. Stein didn't say anything, just led the procession over to the charred spot and put the kid on their knees. When he didn't take the hood off, I did it myself. He winced, but he didn't stop me. This was my place, my job, and I had garnered a reputation for being a professional, a reputation I was about to ruin. The bag came off, and the little girl's tear-streaked face came into view in the harsh fluorescence. Her hair was cut short, dirty blonde, and her face was covered in bruises. Her nose looked broken, her lip split. The blood trickled down her face like red tears, and they mingled with her actual tears as they fell to the damp earth. I sighed, looking at Stein as the gun stayed at the ready. The hell is this? Stein looked surprised. It's an asset. TJ said you could handle these for us. Handle the asset. This is a kid, barely old enough to wipe her own ass. What could she have possibly done? Stein's face was stony. Yours is not to question, soldier. Liquidate this asset, or be liquidated. I looked at the kid, her whole face shaking as the tears and blood fell, and I thought about watching her head pop like a grape. This wasn't some scared adult, some stoic old man, some praying woman, or some cursing thing in a sallow skin. This was a kid. I had killed a lot of people, more in my time here than I ever had during war, but I was still a professional. Professionals had standards. No, I said. Stein blinked. What? No, I don't kill kids. Do it yourself. The 2 men drew their guns, and I was transported back in time. I was standing there, 2 days after Christmas, watching TJ grin and tell me the rules. Now I was standing in the woods, the autumn leaves carpeting the ground, feeling sure that it would soon drink both my blood and the girl's. I'll give you till the count of 3 to kill the girl. After that point, you will both be executed. 1. Their guns were unwavering, but so was my resolve. 2. I closed my eyes and prepared to die. 3. I heard a sound like wet concrete splitting open. It was followed by a high-pitched scream and a pair of bodies hitting the ground. I opened my eyes and saw Stein running towards the town car, his composure gone. The 2 men who'd been holding me at gunpoint were bleeding out on the ground from large, grisly neck wounds. As I watched Stein run, a rust-red something snapped out and caught him in the back of the neck, dropping him inches from the town car. The red thing protruded from the front of his neck, and he gasped futilely as he lay dying. I looked back in the direction of the thing that had snapped out and saw that the girl was now a mass of red spikes, segmented like spider legs. Her face had split down long ways, forcing her face into a grisly sideways maw. The area between the teeth glowed a deep red, and I could see the eyes on the girl's face blinking erratically. The 2 halves of her smile grinned at me, and the effect was a little dizzying. I figured for the second time that day that I was going to die, but she scuttled off into the woods instead, walking on her strange spidery appendages as she crashed through the trees. I stood there for a few minutes, not quite sure I believed I wasn't dead, and then I started running too. I crashed through the woods for hours, running in no particular direction, sure that at any minute the creature or a helicopter from Two Trees would fall on me and either rip me to pieces or just blow me away. I was blundering off with no wallet, no cell phone, just my gun and the clothes I'd been wearing. Was the phone how they tracked me? TJ hadn't said as much, but I kind of figured it was. When the ground went out from under me, I felt the air drop out of my lungs. I fell 5 feet off the muddy ledge and skinned my hands. My knees hurt where I had landed on them, and I realized pretty quick that I had fallen onto the road. If I thought it might be an illusion, the headlights that pinned me to the ground a moment later left me with little doubt. I was kind of numb to the idea of dying at this point, and I just lay there waiting to be run over. Thankfully, the truck stopped, and after a short conversation with the driver, he offered to take me into town. That's how I came to be here in this dingy hotel that just happens to have a computer in the lobby. I sold the gun for about $500 and figured I'd disappear as soon as I'm done writing this. They know I'm gone now, but I don't know if they think I'm dead or if they think I ran. Either way, they'll find me, I'm pretty sure of it. I'm more worried about the little girl that's loose in the woods, and whatever it is that's living beneath their skin. If you see a young girl with short, dirty blonde hair, do not approach her. I don't know if she killed those men to get away, or if she killed them because she wanted to, but she should be considered dangerous if you encounter her in the wild. And if a man from Two Trees offers you a job, do not become the new curator of Black Site 7. The job is definitely not at all what it appears to be. I like exploring. From state parks to virgin wilderness, I love being out and seeing things. I used to go alone a lot, just communing with nature and really roughing it, but thankfully on the day in question, I had someone with me. Jake hadn't wanted to go, had said he had a bad feeling about it, but I insisted. Jake is kind of a shut-in, and I thought that some fresh air and sunshine might help him come out of his shell. Plus, it was spring. Who doesn't like hiking in spring? We were hiking in North Georgia, a state park I won't name so you don't go looking for it. It's beautiful out there. There's a river running through the gorge, places to swim and picnic, rock walls to climb if you're feeling bold, a lot of nature to commune with. We had just come to the end of the usual trail, the river continuing on, even if the marked trail didn't, and Jake looked at me oddly when I didn't turn around and go back. I want to see what's up ahead, I told him. I had never been beyond that, but I'd always wanted to. No way, he said, that's out of bounds. The sign says there are holes or unstable terrain or something. So it means it's dangerous. I know you're all about exploring, Chuck, but I'm not going to die today. Oh, come on. It's just a little further. Don't be a wimp. He looked like he wanted to go back, but my heckling had gotten the better of him. Just a little. Okay, but if it looks bad, we turn around. Understand? Yeah, I said, waving him off as I went past the sign and onto the unmarked trail. The signs were needless anyway, I thought. Georgia's swampy in some places, and sinkholes and subterranean caves aren't that uncommon. We'd just avoid the soft areas, and we'd be fine. I'd read online that there was a waterfall at the end of the trail, but I'd never seen it. Some hikers said that it was beautiful, that it went all the way back up the cliff, which would be a pretty long drop for a waterfall. I wanted some pictures for my travel blog, and as we walked down the trail, I just knew this was going to be a hike we'd both remember for years to come. I must not have been watching where I was going, because all the warning I got was a little cracking sound before I was suddenly in freefall. I was watching the hole in the ground get smaller and smaller as I fell, and then everything went black for a little while. When I opened my eyes, that circle of light above me was like a spotlight. I groaned as I tested my limbs, my back, my neck, and found myself mostly in good shape. My head hurt, but my arms and legs still worked. I'd fallen onto some moss or something that had probably saved my life, if not my brains, from splattering all over the floor. and as I lay there staring up at the ceiling, I saw a silhouette impose itself over some of the light. "Chuck! Thank God, I thought you were dead. I'm trying to get the Rangers, but I can't get a signal. You break anything?" I sat up a little, rubbing my head where a knot was forming. I felt a twinge of pain in my back, but nothing too bad. I was smart enough not to push it, though, lest I mess myself up further and unrepairably. "I don't know. My back, I think." "Well, that's better than most people if they fall into an underground cave, I guess. Unfortunately, I've got all the climbing hooks and you've got all the rope. I'm gonna head back up to the swimming hole and see if I can get some help. Hang tight, I'll be right back." Before I could say anything, Jake was gone, and I was left with nothing but the moss and the darkness around me. I didn't know how big the cave was, and if it was a cave at all, but the blackness just seemed deep and impenetrable. As I lay there, the pain beginning to seep into my body, I thought I heard something. It was light, no more than a tickle on my senses, but it was definitely something. It was like something with claws, walking quietly on stone, like a rat, but bigger than usual. I thought it was my imagination at first, but as it circled my spot like a shark preparing to strike, I realized I wasn't imagining it. I lay as still as I could, hoping that whatever it was would decide I wasn't interesting or edible. But when it spoke, I was taken off guard. It sounded like a woman, like a young, pretty woman. "Hello?" I stayed quiet, not sure what was going on, hoping it was a delusion or a hallucination. "Is someone there?" It sounded real, though, not like any of the voices I had ever heard in a daydream or a regular dream, and despite myself, I decided to answer. "Hello?" There was silence for several long breaths. Then it spoke again. "Are you from up there?" she asked, and I assumed she was pointing at the ceiling. "Yeah, my name's Charles. What's yours?" Silence. Silence. Then it spoke again. "I don't have one. No one has ever called me anything." That was weird. I didn't know anyone who didn't have a name. Made me wonder how long she'd been down here and who had left her down here. Had she fallen into one of these subterranean tunnels like I had? Had she gotten trapped without any way out? I asked her, but after 2 long breaths, she told me that she didn't know. "I don't remember ever not being down here. It's my home. If I lived up there, it was a very long time ago." The long pause between conversations was a little weird, but I put it out of my mind. Clearly, she didn't get a lot of chances to talk to people, and she was just remembering how to make conversation. There was nothing wrong with that. In fact, I was glad she'd found me. I didn't want to be down here all by myself, and maybe I could help her out once Jake came back. "Why don't you come over here into the light?" I asked, patting the stone beside my moss bed. "That way I can see you." Silence. Silence. Then, "I don't really like the light. It hurts my eyes and it burns my skin." That made sense, I thought. If she had been down here long enough, then she was probably kind of sensitive to light. I remembered reading about people who lived in the dark too long and go blind when you take them into the sun, and I felt foolish for asking. It was really more my sense of vanity anyway. The idea that I might be talking to some old hag had crossed my mind, but she sounded young and pretty, and I guess I just wanted a look. "Is there anyone down here with you?" I asked, hearing my throat click as I said it. My throat was dry, and when I reached behind me, I felt for my water bottle and realized it had rolled off in the fall. I was thirsty. I didn't know how long Jake would be gone. "Hey, you don't see a clear water bottle anywhere in here, do you? There's water in it, and I'm so thirsty." Sitting in the sunbeam wasn't helping matters much, and I was scared to move or go looking for my sunscreen. I wasn't in a lot of pain, but they said that a neck or a back injury could be exacerbated if you moved. I lay there, frying like a fish, and I just knew I was going to have a wicked sunburn when I finally got out of here. When the water bottle rolled out of the darkness and bumped my hand, I had to stop myself from flinching away from it. I reached down, trying to move as little as possible, and as the water hit my throat, it was like pure honey. I splashed a little on my face, imagining I could hear the sizzle, and sighed in relief as I found some comfort from the heat. "Thank you," I said, looking at the darkness as if expecting to see someone peeking at me. Silence. Silence. Then, "No problem. You're the first person I've had to talk to in a long time. I don't want you to lose your voice." I smiled, glad to give her the comfort of a human voice. We talked a little, mostly involving me talking and her adding in little things every now and again. I told her about hiking and Jake, about the world above, and she seemed to enjoy my descriptions of things like TV and movies. For her part, she told me that she had lived in the tunnels down here for a while, and that she could see in the dark pretty well. She ate whatever she found in the tunnels, and I wasn't the first person to fall down here. That made me feel bad for her. "None of them offered to get you out?" "You are the first person to be alive when you fell in. Some of them are alive for a little while, but they don't stay alive for long. No one comes for them, and they succumb to the fall." That gave me a chill. "You mean they die?" Silence. Silence. Then, "They do not find their bodies. I told you, Charles. I eat what I find in the cave." My mouth was going dry again, but it had nothing to do with the heat. She just admitted to being a cannibal, but I suppose one couldn't hold that against her either. She was trapped down here. Food was probably not plentiful. She had to survive the best she could, but I couldn't understand how the Park Service didn't know people were going missing. How did they not collect the bodies before she got a chance to eat them? Did they just think people got lost in the park? I thought that maybe they should be a little more proactive, but then Jake's voice whispered in my head, like putting up a sign to stay off the dangerous trail. "Were you," I tried to ask, my tongue getting stuck to the roof of my mouth, "were you planning to eat me?" Silence. Silence. Then, "Yes," she said, not showing the slightest bit of hesitation, "but you were alive and the sun was up. I usually don't find the bodies till after dark, so there's no sun to keep me away." That made me shudder. It isn't often you get to have a conversation with someone who's planning to have you for dinner. And if the sun had been down and I was still alive, I started, but I couldn't finish the thought. I didn't have to, though. Silence. Silence. And then, "Yes," she said. I was quiet, not sure how to answer, but she beat me to it again. "I have to eat, Charles. All creatures must eat, and I am no exception." "You don't feel weird about eating your own kind?" I asked, trying to find the right words so she wouldn't be offended. Silence. Silence. Then, "I don't eat my own kind, Charles. I eat people." My teeth chattered a little at that. Translation, she wasn't a person, which led my mind to ask the question I didn't dare voice. What was she? What was I down here with? Even if my back wasn't injured, even if I wasn't paralyzed, something I was pretty sure I wasn't, I still had no way to get out. I could no more jump 30 feet than I could have tossed Jake the rope, and I was at her mercy, it seemed. She needn't wait until dusk, I thought, as I watched a cloud cruise across the mouth of the hole. If it started to rain, if it became overcast, even if some stray cloud covered my hole in shadows, it would be nothing for her to snatch me back into the darkness. It was a sobering realization to discover that my life was hanging so tenuously. "Charles?" she asked, and I heard that clicking noise getting closer. "Charles, are you okay?" I hadn't noticed until now, but her voice sounded artificial. It was like something approximating the sound of a voice. A speaker playing someone's voice from a video or something. It was a good copy, but I wanted to know what was making it. The longer I lay here, the less certain I was that she was a girl. The more certain I was talking to a monster. "Charles," she said, and there was worry in her voice, as well as hunger. "I'm here, darling," I said, making myself answer her. I was just wool gathering. I hit my head when I came down, and it made me feel a little woozy." The clicking came even closer to the circle of light, a circle that was suddenly not nearly wide enough. "I do not know this word, woozy. What does it mean? Is it like being tired?" "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, it's a lot like being tired." I kept looking up, hoping to see Jake and the Rangers up there. How long had it been? It had to have been at least half an hour. I couldn't imagine that no help had come in half an hour. Even if he had to walk all the way back to the station at the trailhead, someone should have come along by now. I didn't know if they could stop her from dragging me off and eating me, but I really hoped so. "Charles?" Yeah, I said, hoping my voice sounded steadier than I thought it did. "Are you afraid?" I had to stop myself from answering with a big old Texas-sized hell yes, since that might provoke her. Nah, darling. Why would I be scared?" The clicking came up to the edge of the light, slow and unsure, and I imagined that I could see something there, just beyond the shadows. A face or something. It did not look at all human. It looked like a bad driftwood carving of a strange idol from a heathen tribe outside of civilization, and I found it hard not to stare at the spot. "Your heart is beating very fast. Your blood is pumping through your veins like a river. I can hear it. It's making me hungry. Are you afraid of me?" I opened my mouth to deny it, but that was when someone called my name, and a shadow imposed itself across the light. It felt like too much, and I wanted them to move away as they blotted out some of the light. "Chuck!" Jake yelled. "Are you okay?" "Sure, great," I lied, glancing over to see the face I hadn't seen was gone. Someone else cast a shadow over me, and I was shaking as my light was cut off by half. "Chuck, my name's Ranger Mike, and I'm here to help. Ranger Gabe and I are going to rappel down. Is your back or neck injured?" I don't think so," I yelled, listening for the clicking and the voice of the not woman. I think I just hit my head." Mike talked to someone up there, and they concurred. "We're going to drop down flares so we don't get stuck. Close your eyes, okay?" I nodded, but there was no way in hell I was going to close my eyes with that thing around. It was strange how quickly she had become it, and how little I wanted to bring her back up with me now. I had no idea what I'd been talking to, and suddenly I didn't want to know. I wanted out of this hole, out of this hell, and I promised whatever was listening that I would never scoff at signs there to keep me safe again. If they would get me out of here, I might never even come back to the woods again. The flares came down, and I saw the cave was much bigger than I had thought it was. The flares sent up ghostly light, casting everything in flickering illumination, and that was when I saw it. It was only for a second, as it retreated down a side passage, but I caught a glimpse of what I'd been talking to. The driftwood carving analogy wasn't far off, the whole thing looking white and thin and kind of fragile looking. He had walked around on these long, thin legs that looked like nothing so much as pure bone, and its eyes were high up in its bony forehead. It looked at me almost apologetically as it left, but the 2 rangers who rappelled down never so much as glanced into the cave. They had me up on a stretcher before I could warn them, and after securing it to the ropes, they had all 3 of us winched up as the flares burned in the darkness below. There were more rangers at the top, paramedics too, and they got me up topside, and I was dragged to stable ground as I was checked out by the EMTs. They said the bruise on my head was nasty, but there probably wasn't any brain damage. My spine appeared fine, though they wouldn't know for sure until I had an EKG, and my neck felt okay too. Ultimately, they said I was very lucky, and I told them they didn't know the half of it. I'm in a hospital room now, waiting for my EKG, but just wanted to get this down while it was fresh. I can't prove that it wasn't a hallucination. The ER doc said I was definitely concussed, but I think it was real. I talked with something under the ground, something that would have eaten me if it hadn't been for the light encircling me. I was extremely lucky in a lot of ways, and I thank God that I made it out with little more than cuts and bruises. If I hike again, I'll be paying more attention to the signs from now on. You never know what you might find just below the surface. I was looking for something to make my end of summer sleepover amazing. What I got was a sleepover that no one would ever forget. Margot, Jenny, and I had been friends for years, since kindergarten even, and we were getting ready to start 7th grade in a few days and wanted to hold our annual slumber party. I had the pigs in a blanket, the chips that Margot liked, the sour gummy worms for Jenny, and a huge bottle of Dr. Fizz for us to share. I was getting the movies ready when I realized I hadn't found our favorite game yet, and started hunting through the closet. We had played Mall Madness, a game my mom had given me from when she was young, and it was a hit at any sleepover. We would shop till we drop, charge it up, and then laugh about who had the best deals and spent the least amount of money. It was great. I had probably replaced the batteries in it a dozen or more times, but I just couldn't find it anywhere. I had always put it at the top of my closet, right beside my old Barbie travel case, but today it was nowhere to be found. I blew out in exasperation, wondering where it could be, but ultimately decided to go check the attic. The game had come from the attic after all, so maybe Mom had put it back up there. I pulled down the ladder, glad it was still daylight so it didn't look so spooky up there, and went to go look for Mall Madness. It was kind of a chore because Mom is something of a hoarder. Dad calls her a pack rat, and it seems pretty fitting. She keeps everything. She had clothes from when my sister and I were little. She's got art projects from when she was in school up there. And she had boxes and boxes of old photos and memory books, all kinds of things. I pushed aside a bunch of dresses and found an area dominated by old toys and games that she had saved. It was a mishmash of dolls and books and some old doll houses and a couple of dusty board games. I didn't find Mall Madness, but I found about 7 others. Apples to Apples was for babies, and Uncle Wiggily looked kind of weird. Don't Wake Daddy was missing pieces, some of which I'd lost, and Monopoly was just too long. I was about to give up when I saw a black box at the bottom of the stack that I didn't think I'd ever seen before. It was covered in dust, the letters barely visible, and I pulled it down, tugging it quickly so the other boxes wouldn't fall. I wiped off the cover and read the red lettering on it slowly, the red and black hard to read since it was so faded. Mystery Man, the name proclaimed, and I was about to open it and see the instructions when my mom called and let me know that my friends were here, so I ran downstairs to see them. I tossed the game onto my bed as I ran past, figuring we would check it out later, and we were soon all laughing and jumping as we got excited about the night. We ate dinner, we played hide and seek in the backyard, we hung out in my treehouse, and as it started to get dark, we came in to watch movies, play games, and start the rest of the evening's activities. Dad works nights, and Mom didn't really ever make us go to bed when we were having a sleepover. We usually passed out sometime around midnight, but tonight, we wanted to stay up till we heard my dad pull in from work. We wanted to see if we could stay up till dawn, just to see if we could, and we had enough snacks and sugar to manage it, we thought. By 11:30, we had watched 2 movies, eaten most of the snacks, and drank half a bottle of soda, as we braided each other's hair during the end part of Balto. We were a little bored with movies, and Jenny asked if we could play Mall Madness for a little bit. That was when I remembered the game, and told them I had something different in mind tonight. The game had worked its way half under my pillow somehow, and when I pulled it out, my friends oohed and awed at it appreciatively. We opened the box and found a black board with silver spaces, the big orange phone in the middle having an honest-to-God spin dial on it. We had cards with descriptions on them, and it felt more like we were assembling a police sketch than a dream date. We would go around the board, landing on spaces and drawing cards, and when someone found a card with a number on it, we would dial the number, and it would help us determine the identity of our mystery man. "So it's a little like Dream Date then," Margot said. "Seems weird," Jenny said, "like we're hunting him or something." I looked at the instructions, but they gave no particular instruction on the purpose for making a description of the guy. We would take turns until we had assembled our mystery man, and then we would call 000 on the phone and give our description to the person on the other end. Somehow, they would know if it was right or not, and tell us that we had won, or tell us to try again. "Simple enough," I said, and I picked up the dice and rolled first. It was about 4 turns later when Jenny landed on a card that gave her a phone call. She dialed the number, but she was having some trouble until I showed her how the rotary phone worked. Mom had showed me, saying that was how they used to call people a million years ago, and once she got the number plugged in, she held the phone against her head and waited for the click. Someone came on after 3 rings, a weird staticky voice that I didn't much like, and whatever it told Jenny, she didn't seem to like it either. After a few minutes, she put the phone down, her hands shaking a little. "Well, what did it say?" Margot asked. Jenny cleared her throat, trying again to get control. I'm not supposed to tell anyone. The phone man said the call was just for me." She handed me the dice, her hands very sweaty and a little shaky, and we continued. It was my turn to use the phone next, but Margot pulled out a card and laid it down. The card let her steal my phone call, and I laughed a little as I stuck my tongue out at her. She dialed the number and held the phone, interested to hear what was to come. None of us thought it was real. Well, Margot and I didn't, but Jenny scooted a little away as she made her call. The voice picked up, and something quick and harsh made Margot's smile slip off her face as she listened. Her lips trembled as she put the phone down, and she wrote something on a piece of paper and shook her head when I tried to pass her the dice. The guy on the phone said to let you roll again. He said some other stuff, but I'm not supposed to say. I rolled again and grumbled as I landed just shy of a phone space. I wanted to hear what had them so spooked. This was a board game, ages 10 and up and all that, and there was no way it could be that terrifying. We continued taking turns, the girls wanting to keep playing, despite their obvious discomfort. Finally, I got my wish. I drew a card after landing on a spot, and it was a phone booth. Searched the deck for a phone card and dialed the number. I took the first one I found and dialed the number, letting it ring 5 times before someone picked up.
"Mystery man is blonde, about 6 feet tall, and a wide-brimmed hat. That's for your ears only, Toots. So don't tell any of those other little bitches what I said. I'll know."
That was a little weird, and I put the phone down with some hesitation. I didn't think they could say things like that in a board game like this. Margot and Jenny didn't bother to ask what he'd said, and I made notes as Margot took her turn. I had a blonde card and a wide-brimmed hat card, but I didn't have one that said 6 feet tall. I guessed I'd have to draw for it. Meanwhile, Margot had gotten another phone call, and as she listened, I saw her glance over at Jenny, and the look wasn't friendly. I didn't know what the phone guy was telling her, but it seemed to be making her mad. We played the game for hours, and in that time, the game got worse and worse. Anytime Jenny got a phone call, it nearly put her into tears. Anytime Margot got a phone call, it seemed to make her angrier and angrier. I tried to take the phone from Jenny at one point, offering to take the call for her, but she shook her head and told me the phone man had said that she had to take it, whether she liked it or not. "Yeah," Margot said, her eyes looking mean. "She needs to take her calls, just like the rest of us." As the game went on, we got more clues. I learned that my mystery man was a 6-foot-tall blonde in a wide-brimmed hat with a mustache, black pants, and a white shirt. I had most of that, but I was still missing the 6 feet tall with a mustache card. The man on the phone had alluded to the fact that Margot would soon make her move against Jenny, the two being like dogs ready to fight. And when Margot threw down a card, it looked more like a knife toss than a friendly showing. "White glove. I get to take one of your cards, Jenny." Jenny nodded, holding her cards out like a fan, and Margot picked the fourth one, pulling it back smugly before glowering at it. "You switched it," she accused, flipping it around to show Jenny a green sweater card. Jenny shook her head. "Nuh-uh." "Yes, you did," Margot accused. "The phone man said you were a cheater, but I didn't want to believe it at first. Looks like he was right." I never cheated," Jenny said, almost crying. "Then why wasn't this a green scarf card? The phone guy..." But she brought her teeth together hard, and it sounded like wood clacking together. "What?" I asked. "What did he say?" "Nothing," Margot said. "Doesn't matter. Just play the game." Jenny didn't look like she wanted to keep playing the game, but she didn't look like she was capable of stopping either. The game would continue, whether we wanted it to or not. And after that, the phone calls got even weirder. I pulled a card, dialed a number, and was greeted with about 10 seconds of heavy breathing before he spoke.
The mystery man has a long, sharp knife. He's walking down the street. Turn left on Martin Drive. I'll soon be there.
That sent chills through me. Martin Drive was 2 streets away. That was like an easy 20-minute walk. What the heck was this? These weren't pre-recordings. This had to be live, but that was impossible. The game was probably 20 years old at least. It couldn't happen. "Look," I said, hanging up the phone, let's just call it a draw. I think this is getting a little too real." And the orange phone rang, and I felt my words wither in my mouth as we just sat there and looked at it. It was like watching a bomb tick down, none of us wanting to be the one to touch it. It just kept ringing and ringing, and finally, to my surprise, Jenny reached out to pick it up. Her hands shook, her breath coming in quick gasps. She lifted it to her ear, and I heard someone snarl something as she winced like she'd been struck. She held the phone out for me, hands moving like someone with nerve damage, and said it was for me. I took it and held it to my ear and said hello. "Whether you play the game or not, you little bitch, the mystery man is still coming. If none of you wins, then he's coming to get all of you. But if one of you manages to win, then they might be safe. You never know. Better finish what you started." I hung up the phone, trying to keep my teeth from chattering as I told them what he'd said. "That's not true," Margot said. "The phone guy told me that I had to beat Jenny, or I'd get taken. He said Jenny was trying to win on purpose so the mystery man would get me." Jenny burst into tears. "He said that you two were trying to sacrifice me to the mystery man and that I deserved it. He said I was useless, just holding you two back, and I deserved to get dragged away." I thought about it, weighing what he had said. Sounds like if we all win, then he can't get at any of us. We have to work together to get out of this. Jenny shook her head. "He said if I told you what my mystery man looked like, that he'd get me for sure." "Me too," Margot said, the anger slowly turning into fear. "Well, who cares what he said? He's coming regardless, so we have to do something." So we played the game cooperatively. Helping each other proved a better strategy, and Margot soon had everything for her mystery man. Margot dialed 000 and declared that her mystery man was 5'4" and bald, with a hockey mask and a machete and a white jumpsuit. The voice came from the rotary, making us all jump with its suddenness as it reverberated around the room.
"You have discovered your mystery man, Margot. You are safe for now."
We were still for a moment. Then Jenny reluctantly picked up the dice and kept playing. She got a card, dialed the number, and choked out a sob as the man on the phone told her about her mystery man. "He's on your street," she said, sobbing a little, and I rolled the dice so we could get to her turn again. "White glove," I said. "Let me see him." Jenny held up her cards, but she started nodding at one that was 5 into the stack. I drew it, and sure enough, it was the mustache. Now all I needed was the 6 foot tall and the knife. Jenny went again, drew a card, and breathed a sigh of relief as she dialed 000. "My mystery man is 6 feet tall, dark-haired, with a rope and a long coat." The phone made the sound again before declaring,
"Jenny, you have discovered your mystery man. You are safe for now."
I picked up the dice when I heard something creak the door downstairs. It was long and loud, like a funhouse door at the carnival. I tossed the dice, moved my piece, and drew a card. It was a phone call, and I threw it away and rolled again. I moved, drew, and pumped my fist as I got the 6 foot card. I was rolling again when the phone began to ring. I let it ring, rolling and moving like a madman. I drew, but it wasn't what I needed. I got another phone card and threw it away. I could hear my mystery man on the stairs, moving as slow as any horror movie villain. I drew the gun and cursed as I tossed it away. I drew another white glove card, but I tossed it and kept rolling and moving. I could hear him on the stairs, his boots clumping menacingly. I had to find the knife. I had to banish the mystery man. If I didn't, it would mean my death. He came onto the landing when the ringing phone became too much, and I picked it up and put it down again. It started to ring after a few seconds, and I did it again before moving my piece. I could still hear his boots in the hallway that led to my room, and they grew louder by the second. Jenny and Margot were watching the door to my bedroom like it might explode, but I was focused on the task. Rope, toss. A wide-brimmed hat, toss. He was walking past my little sister's room now. He'd pass Mom and Dad's room after that, and then it would be down to my room at the end of the hall. What would happen if he got to me? Would they even believe Margot and Jenny? Would the mystery man leave them alone once he'd got me? I didn't know, but my heart leapt into my throat. I'd drawn the knife. I was done. I dialed 000 as soon as the door opened to my room. Ginny and Margot gasped, sliding away from the board and as far from the door as they could get. My mystery man has blonde hair, a wide-brimmed hat, is 6 feet tall, has black pants, a white shirt, and a knife. I practically screamed it into the phone, falling forward to cover it as I expected that long, sharp knife to stab into me at any minute. I heard the tone, and then heard the phone crackle again.
That was a close one, Heather. You're safe from your mystery man. For now.
I just lay there for a while, panting and trembling, as Margot and Ginny came to comfort me. They told me they had seen him standing in the doorway, his blonde hair spilling beneath his hat, and a sharp knife in his hand. He had raised it, took a single step, and then just disappeared into nothingness. We lay there, just kind of basking in the feeling of being alive, until I heard my dad pulling into the driveway. We had made it. We stayed up until sunrise, just like we wanted to. I went down and hugged my dad, who seemed surprised that I was still awake, but glad to see me, and then the three of us turned in. I put Mystery Man back in the attic, and have never touched it again. One brush with death was enough for me. So if you find a copy of your own while trolling through the thrift stores and antique malls in your area, be very careful with it. The mystery man you find might not be a mystery for very long. Travis pulled up in front of the old cabin, ready to prepare everything for the coming weekend. It would be nice to have the rental property again. It had been closed for the last 8 months as the police combed over every square foot for evidence. Travis grimaced as he thought of it, cursing his luck at being out all that cash. He'd had a funny feeling about that writer type, but he'd needed the money. It had been a slow season, and he needed to make it up before the snows came. Who would have known that the snows would come early that year? As he pulled up, Travis saw that the place looked completely untouched, except for the police tape that crisscrossed the door. As he broke the tape and the door came open, he breathed in the dust of the last few months. Travis had been here only a few times since the investigation had begun. They had been searching the woods mostly, searching for the man who had been on the New York Times bestseller list for about 6 months a few years ago. He had disappeared sometime during the blizzard, and no one had any idea where he was. Travis didn't much care if some city boy had wandered off during a storm, but he hoped it wouldn't be something he'd have to tell people. It would hurt his chances of renting the cabin again. Travis grimaced as he saw the place, realizing that this would be more work than he thought. The front door was supposed to open onto the front room with a fireplace and some soft furniture. There was a kitchenette, quartered off by a kitchen island, and a ladder that led up to the loft room that overlooked it. It was all very cozy and very rustic, and the tourists loved its country charm, as it said on his review page. It seemed that the crazy writer had transformed it into a disaster area. The carpets were stained, and by the way his boots crunched on them, Travis just knew he was going to have to rip it all out. The couch was flipped over, and one of the chairs was smashed to pieces. Some of those pieces were shoved into the fireplace, along with a hefty bag of trash and various other things. The fireplace was black with soot, the rockwork charred with ash, and by the smell, Travis thought the guy might have been cooking something in it. The kitchen was mostly okay. The refrigerator would need to be replaced, and the sink was full of sludge, but he thought the cabinets were intact until he got closer. That was when Travis noticed that every surface on the dark wood had weird runes scribbled into it, and would probably need to be ripped out. The ladder was still there, and as he climbed up to the loft, a smell met him before he got to the room. The walls were scribbled with the same runes and symbols, and the bed was stripped of its bedding and pillow top. That likely explained what had gone into the fireplace, but it didn't explain why this guy had rubbed his excrement all over the bed. The mattress in the frame reeked, and Travis roared in rage as he realized that there was no saving that rustic bed frame. something that had run him about $4,000. He kicked the end table, the drawer popping in, only to slide slowly back out again. He shoved it, angry that it wouldn't go in, but realized something was stuck behind it. Dragging the drawer out, he found a manila envelope that someone had sealed up neatly and stuck in the back of the dresser drawer. He blinked, unsure of what it was. How had the cops not found this? It wasn't even hidden very well, and he would have surely seen it if it had been here before the writer arrived. It could only have been left by his latest tenant, and as he split the seal, he was curious about what he would find inside. Inside was a manuscript of about 120 pages and a salt and pepper mead binder. The front of the manuscript bore the same weird symbols as the cabinets and the walls, and to Travis, they looked like a weird combination of hieroglyphs and Nordic runes. Travis had a little more experience with runes. He'd hung around with some of the Odinists for the 12 months he'd been a guest of Stragview Prison, but the hieroglyphs were only a guess from the mummy movies he'd seen. The journal, however, seemed to be written in English at the start. Before he opened it, he decided to go out on the porch and sit on the swing, wanting to be away from the smell of the cabin. The first page was easy enough to read, the writing clean and clear. November 28th, day 1 of writing. Can't believe I got this cabin for so cheap. Couldn't even get a motel in town for this price. It's the perfect place to start my next book, and I'm excited. I brought my typewriter, the only real way to ply your craft, and I've set up a desk upstairs. From there, I can look over the forests and the mountains beyond. These sights will surely push me on as I write, and I'm hoping to be mostly done by the end of the week. I told my publicist to watch my social media, and I turned my phone off for the week before leaving it in the car. I want no distractions. November 29th, day 2 of writing. Well, if this isn't a surprise. I woke up this morning to find snow flurries. It's not sticking yet, but there's a weird wind blowing out there that makes me glad I brought my coat just in case. I brought the typewriter out onto the porch and was quite happy to be distracted by the falling snow. Even so, I wrote about 20 pages before I turned in for the night. Chapters 1 through 3 are sitting on the nightstand, and I'm pleased as punch about them. Ramsey Reed has found his latest case and has begun to chase the tail of this particular cat burglar. It'll be a great sequel to Ramsey Reed's first adventure. I sat on the porch till dark, listening to the moths as they smacked against the porch light. It's peaceful out here, the quiet night disturbed only by the sound of the snow coming down. I will truly be sad to leave this cabin, as weird as that sounds. I love my little apartment in the city, but out here, amongst the hills and the snow, it's truly spectacular. It's a little strange, though, as far up the mountain as I am, I felt like someone was watching me. Sitting on the porch, drinking tea and enjoying the quiet as I decompress, I could swear I saw something out in the woods around the cabin. It's just a shape, nothing definite, but being out here gives me hills have eyes vibes. I don't own a gun. I hadn't even thought to bring my knife, and when I went inside, I was very happy for the chain on the door. It looked thick and sturdy, and I hoped I wouldn't need it. November 30th, day 3 of writing. I finished another 20 pages today, and I'm glad I brought enough food for the week because I woke up to another surprise. I found the yard covered in snow, my car almost completely covered. The wind had blown it against the door deep enough to keep it from opening without a hard push. There must have been a real blizzard last night, which I seem to have slept through because the snow is easily 3 feet deep as I write this. I'm sitting in the living room watching it come down and wondering how long the power will last. It's holding firm, but I've seen it flicker a few times. I went ahead and had the steaks I'd been saving for Sunday, but if push comes to shove, I can put the rest of the meat in the snow, I guess. Despite the weather, I'm still impressed with how the book is coming. Ramsey has found the trail of his cat burglar, a true thief who's about to escalate in a big way, and soon their confrontation will be at hand. Speaking of confrontations, I saw someone again through the window. It's still in the woods, but it's clearer tonight. The moon came out, turning the falling snow into a field of diamonds, and I can see him at the edge of the woods, just watching the house. No, not the house, not really. He's definitely watching me. When I stare at him, I can feel him staring back. I thought about pulling the ladder up behind me tonight, but opted not to. I was not ready to give in to my paranoia, and the chains on the front door are pretty thick. December 1st, day 4 of writing. I only managed 15 pages today, the snow distracting me as it came down. I'm glad today that I brought the typewriter and this journal, because the power went out about noon. I found a grate under the sink in the kitchen that I can stick in the fireplace, and a big stack of wood out under a tarp out back, so I guess I won't starve. There's no way I can make it out to my little car. It's almost completely buried in the snow now. The road was hard enough to get up without snow, but now that the roads are icy, I'd be in for nothing but a quick trip to the ground if I tried. I had to move upstairs again. Riding in the living room makes me feel like something's watching me. Even during the daytime, I can feel eyes on me. It's very disconcerting. It's not as bad upstairs, but I had to move away from the windows, too. Something has noticed me in here, and I don't much care for the interest. I'll be pulling up the ladder tonight. Silly or not, I don't like the feeling of being watched. Travis sipped his coffee as he read the journal, more and more certain that it had been the writer's with each page. He did remember getting a refund from the power company for the power being knocked out up here, but it had only been for a couple of days, a week tops. The poor guy had probably had to cook over a fireplace till Monday or Tuesday of that next week, poor baby, and shiver under the extra blankets in the closet that night. Nothing to whine about, Travis thought. Trapped in a well-stocked cabin with a working fireplace and an amazing view sounded like a fine vacation to him. He flipped to the next page and read on. December 2nd, day 5 of writing. I cooked my first meal over the fireplace this morning. Fortunately, the owner left a cast iron skillet that I use to make eggs and bacon, and some toast that's a little crispier than I strictly like. I put all the meat in the freezer. It's been thawing slowly, but I think it'll keep it fresh for a few days given the weather outside. I only wrote a little today, 5 pages at best. I'm disappointed at the effort, but it was too bloody cold out there. I spent most of the day shivering under a thick blanket, jacket on, the cold eating at my bones. I stoked the fire, but it didn't seem enough. I had it blazing by bedtime, and that's how I caught my first good look at that creature that's been stalking me. I decided to get a good fire going and put the screen up, maybe building up some heat so I don't shiver my teeth out all night. I woke up a lot last night as I pulled the blanket around me, and it hurt my writing today. After getting it going, I put a bunch of logs on and turned to climb the ladder when I saw a face in the glass. It was pale, too pale to be a person, and it was pressed against the window like a kid on a bus. It had long, greasy hair, its eyes the color of molten pennies. It stared at me, and as it saw me looking at it, it grinned, showing a mouthful of gravel-gray teeth. I screamed and almost fell off the ladder as I scrambled up it and yanked it up behind me. I sat on the floor after I got there, the firelight making shadows jump and jitter on the wall. In those lights, I could still see his face as he smooshed it against the glass. The thing could see me too. I knew it, and I pulled the covers off the bed and brought them around me as I sat watching it. As I write this, I've been looking up to peek at it, but my eyes are getting kind of heavy. I don't know how much longer I'll be awake to keep watch. Travis saw a long smear of graphite on the page and figured he lost the fight not long after. The tale was troubling, but Travis felt sure that his door would hold against if anyone tried to come in on the guy. He'd built those doors to hold up against bears when the cabin was empty. The doors were still there, too, so unless the writer had been dumb enough to let the thing in, he'd be safe until the snow melted. The snow had actually melted some the following Tuesday, before dumping another 5 feet on them over the coming weeks. The writer could have left by Wednesday at the least, so where had he gone? Travis read on, becoming intrigued by the mystery here. December 3rd. Can't really call this a day of writing. I didn't write a single page, not so much as a sentence. He was gone when I woke up, but I moved all the wood into the kitchen just the same. The whole time I could feel something watching me from the tree line, and I wished I had a gun. It's weird to write that sentence, but much less accept it as a statement of fact. I've always been staunchly opposed to guns, never so much as fired one, but I think I might be ready to rethink my stance after this. As I transferred the wood inside, I found something on the wood around the back door that made me think he'd been hanging around the house longer than just last night. The wood is marked with swirls and runes. The runes don't look like anything I've seen in fantasy books. These runes are angry, pagan-looking. I'm not even sure what he carved them with. The way they've been done makes me think he dug them out with his fingernails. It took up a lot of time inspecting them, and it distracted me from the feeling of being watched. The more I looked at them, the more they seemed to move and squirm. The story they told was something I couldn't decipher, but I could almost believe that, given enough time, I could have made some sense of them. The next thing I knew, the sun was setting, and I'd been looking at the wood for 8 hours. He came back again that night. I stoked the fire, but I scrambled into the loft without looking at the window. As I write, I can see him peeking in. His pale face is hard to hide, and I know he knows I can see him. I can almost believe that he's naked. I know he can't be. It's freezing out there, but I can see his bare shoulders and hands with no gloves on them. They're sitting against the window like pale starfish, and the fingers are just as pale as the moon. I'm wrapped in the blanket again, and the shivering makes my writing so uneven. What if this storm never ends? What if I'm stuck here all winter? What if I'm stuck here forever? December 4th, day 6 of writing. I managed 2 pages today, but I don't know how much more I'll be able to do. The story just won't come anymore. When I sit down and write it, I feel like such a fraud. It makes it difficult to string the words together. Am I even the same man who wrote Ramsey Reed's story? I'm devoid of ideas. I'm a hack. I can't keep writing this story. Better to turn it over to someone else. I don't deserve to write this story. I shouldn't have come here. This was a mistake. Frost talked about the bleakness of the forest and the harsh beauty of nature, but I thought it would help inspire me to continue this series. Instead, it's just shown me what a hopeless fake I am. Fake. Fake. Freak. 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 He had filled the rest of the page with the word fake or some misspelling of it. Travis could see that some of them had nearly gone through the page. By the date, he had written this Monday night, so tomorrow's entry, if there was one, would probably be him leaving and heading back to Kashmir. He'd feel like a real horse's ass as the weather rattled down and be on his way, though clearly that hadn't happened if the cops were still looking for him. Travis turned the page, and what he read made him blink. There was indeed another entry, but not what he had expected. December 5th. The snow is back and in force. It's blowing a proper blizzard out there, and all the windows are covered in frost. It does stop me from seeing the man, but it's also a little scary. I'm wondering when this will end, but I still can't see any end in sight. The snow's up to the door now, completely covering the porch. I can look through the front window and only see the top of the glass pane. I'm running out of food. I was supposed to leave this morning, placed clean, key under the mat, but I can't get out either door. I could climb out the loft window, but I'd still have to walk down the mountain. That seems like a bad idea in this blizzard. Luckily, I moved the wood inside, 'cause I'd have to tunnel out in order to get it now. The fire's burning, keeping some of the chill out, but it does little to turn the frost away from the windows. Despite the cold, he came back tonight. I could see him pressing his face against the top of the window, and I'm hiding under the covers as I write. It's all been a bit too much today. Travis furrowed his brow. That was wrong. The storm had ended Sunday, and the snow had been mostly melted by Tuesday morning. The temperature had been in the low 40s, unseasonably warm for the time of year, and the snow had stayed away until next week. There should have been no snow to hold him up. What was he talking about? Travis flipped to the next page, but the next 3 days were little more than footnotes. Until the 9th, that was. December 6th. Burned the last of the wood. Food running low. Cold creeping in. December 7th. So cold. Food running low. Burned the bedspread and the pillow top. It made a lot of smoke, but not much heat. I have another day's worth of food at best. The snow has to end or I'll die up here. December 8th. Food is gone. Wood's gone. Smashed up the chair and burned it. No hope. No hope. December 9th. This may be my last testament, or my suicide note, or whatever you want to call it. I don't have much of a choice. I have to leave and try to walk down the mountain. I'm out of food, I'm out of fuel, and I'm out of options. I have to walk down the mountain to get some help. It's about a 5-mile hike through the snow, and I've taken all the provisions I can find. Water, the last of the food, which is 2 granola bars and a pack of trail mix, tube of toothpaste for emergencies, and those are my only supplies. I got my jacket and 2 pairs of pants on. If I don't come back, I hope someone finds this and looks for me come spring. Travis expected that would be the end, but there was more. A surprising amount of more. As he flipped through the pages, he could see that almost the whole book was full, though some of it were those weird scribbles he'd seen on the wall. The writer had apparently lived through the hike and come back to tell the tale, but Travis wasn't sure it was just him who had come back. The writing from here on was rougher, less neat, and he thought maybe something had happened on that hike. As he read on, he discovered that he was right. December something. I don't know how long I was in the snow, but somehow I'm back in the cabin. I woke up in the loft, lying on the floor without my backpack. I didn't dream the descent from the mountain. I can still remember it so vividly. I set out at morning, crunching through the snow, sinking up to my knees as I tried not to break a leg. I should have made town by afternoon, but the forest just went on and on. The snow was high enough that I dropped from the loft window and didn't get hurt, and it seemed to go on forever as I tried to make headway. As the sun set, I became aware that I was going to have to make camp out here, and I increased my plotting in hopes that I'd get there quicker. That was when I fell. Suddenly the snow was moving under me, and I was falling off the mountain in a jumble of arms and legs. I went above and then under, above and then under, like a wave trying to hang on to its rider, and I blacked out before I came to a stop. I didn't expect I would ever wake up, just freeze to death like Jack Torrance at the end of The Shining, but I was not so fortunate. Someone found me. I woke up under the moonlight, and he was standing over me. He wasn't pale like I had thought. His skin was like ice, though still very much malleable. He was naked, as I had thought, but he lacked definition. He had no genitals, no nipples, no tone to his body or features other than his face. He was like a mannequin made of ice, and when he leaned down, I thought he was going to kill me. When he touched my forehead, and a lance of cold agony shot through me. I wished he had. I blacked out again, and when I woke up, I was here. It's getting dark, but I'm not cold anymore. I guess I'll just get some rest. First day of writing. I woke up today and felt inspired. The house is still snowbound, so I took out my typewriter and started writing again. I tried to write Ramsey's story as I'd done before, but the words don't seem important. There's a new story now, something different. It's about something older, something that lives in the woods, something that only comes with the snow. I started writing, but the words didn't look right. The words aren't right. The words aren't his words. I threw the typewriter into the snow and started writing by hand. Whatever that thing did when it touched me, it taught me how to write to him and tell the story that he wanted me to. It taught me how to write those weird scribbles that are over the back door. And now I can properly tell his story. Second day of writing. I'll use the old words here, just in case I happen to lose these new words. I wrote 50 pages last night. By hand. I haven't written that much by hand since high school, when Mr. Kimbler insisted that all our essays and dissertations be done by hand. If you speak the speak of the bard, then you must speak from the hand, not from the tapping of so many keys, he would so often say. I get it now. The human language, the language I once wrote in, cannot convey this story. People do not have words for the places and things he has shown me. The old words tell about things we cannot dream of, places and creatures and ideas so foreign that a sea slug at the bottom of the ocean might as well try to understand a car and how it works. I've been writing all day, writing all night, and I don't even think I'm a quarter of the way done. This may be the greatest work of my life. This may be the thing that ultimately destroys me. Third day of writing. I talked to the creature last night. I was writing, the pages really stacking up, when I heard someone knock at the door. It was the thing, that featureless thing that met me in the snow. He had a deer slung over one shoulder, a huge and bleeding buck, and when he came in, he threw it on the floor and just looked at me. I guess he didn't see any of the fear or uncertainty he'd seen before, because he asked me how my work was proceeding. He didn't say it like that, not necessarily, but I understood what he meant, and I nodded, showing him the pages. He said the deer was for me, and I realized that I hadn't eaten anything in 2 days. As I ate the deer, raw and oozing, he told me about him, the master we now both serve. I suppose I serve him. I seem to be serving him with every scrape of my pen, and to say otherwise would be false. He told me of his time, he told me of his home, and he told me of his enemies. I asked who he was, but he never gave me a name, and when he laughed, it sounded like glaciers colliding. You know him, Harold. He's chosen you, taken you as his chronicler, and if you don't know him by now, then he will surely destroy you before you can. We talked all night, and he left as the sun rose. I wrote this journal entry before my writing started for the day. I haven't slept since I came back. Haven't felt like I needed to. That should scare me, but it's honestly invigorating. My writing is becoming less coherent, at least where these words are concerned. I don't know how I feel about that. My words have always been what I have, my talent, and to lose them is scary. What I have found seems better, but it scares me too. It raw, primal, and the words are like the ones I saw on the back door before I knew them. I kind of want to go see what they are, but the house is almost completely under the snow now. I write in darkness, and yet I see. This house is like a tomb, but I think perhaps it's also a cocoon. I hope I'm the butterfly, and I might emerge changed. I pray it's not a wasp nest, and I'm a dead bug waiting to be eaten when the eggs hatch. Travis didn't like what he was reading. It sounded like this fellow was losing his mind. He had taken a spill out in the snow and had somehow gotten back home, and now he was slowly going cabin crazy. Travis still couldn't understand why. The day he was talking about had been sunny. The snow hadn't come back until the week after, and if Travis hadn't been visiting relatives in Asheville at the time, he'd have come up here to make sure the place was clean before the cops called to ask about this missing renter. That had been a whole mess, too. The man's editor had called when she hadn't heard from him by Thursday, and the cops had gone to do a well check and found the house destroyed. They had called Travis and started going over everything, but that had been a whole mess, too. The man's editor had called when she hadn't heard from him by Monday of the next week. and the cops had been unable to do a well check because of all the new snow that had started falling. They had gone up after a week of frantic calls in a snowmobile and found the house destroyed. They had called Travis and started going over everything, but that had been the start of this whole endeavor. Now it sounded like the guy had just sat up in his house and wrecked the place, maybe suffering from a concussion or some kind of mental break. Travis turned the page, but it just kept getting rougher. It started to look like charcoal marks, and the guy's new writing style only got sloppier. Travis didn't know who this mystery fellow was, but it sounded like the police might need to know about him. Travis had lived in Kashmir his whole life. Weird stuff was just kind of part and parcel for the town, but this was something else. The mountains had always been a place that Travis could come to get away from the weirdness for a while. They were a place he could hunt and fish and sit on the porch, hike the trails, and just forget about all the crazy stuff he lived with in town. As he read on, he started to feel the tickly feeling the writer was talking about. Suddenly, Travis didn't want to be on the mountain anymore. 4-day writing. He came back again. He brought meat, and I ate. We talked about the creature. He read over my notes. He liked them, said I did good. He told me that he was once like me, person trapped in the snow until someone like him came and helped. He is Brogan, one of his helpers. I will be Brogan, he says, but I don't know if I believe. Made 70 pages, but there's problem. Am running out of paper. Pen stopped working today, but I held it over fire and got the ink to work again. Finding it difficult to make words today for journal, though my hands write the older words with much speed. These words feel stupid and heavy as I make them. The pen must be saved, so I will stop for today. Day. Burned pages of old story in fire. Old story not good. New story better. Paper gone. Am writing on wall now. Wall will be new book now. Hymn book. Words hurt head. Need right here, but hard. Watched pages burn. Felt nice to see. Pages old way. New story is new way. Day 3. It makes me spinny to write this, but I had to get some of myself again. I think it's been 3 days since I wrote, but I can't sure. Sometime in last few days, I've changed. I'm different. I'm like Brogan when I see him in woods. I'm smooth. Definition gone. I'm trying to get myself together, but I don't think I can. Must write stories. Must stop old words. Last entry. I'm in the bathroom, and I don't know how long door will hold. Earlier today, cut myself on pen as I wrote. I just did it again, and it clears my head some. Something came last night. It saw what I done and liked it. I'm bleeding pretty bad from my other hand, but I need to keep enough wits to write this down. He rode a horse and carried a sword. His eyes are fire. His skin green metal. Brogan say he is him. Green man. That now I go with them. I don't think I can say stop. I want go, but I want not. I will hide this somewhere for someone to find. If find, take to police. Let know what happened. I go with green. Travis jumped as he caught sight of something in his peripheral vision. He'd been so enthralled by the last few entries that the thing had damn near snuck up on him. Now it stood halfway between the woods and the house like a kid playing red light, green light. It was human-sized, naked and pale as the late afternoon sun beat down on it. Its hair wasn't straggly like the one the writer had described, cut into a short red flat top that was going wild quickly. His face was somewhere between doubt and a grin, like someone who's been caught but isn't sure whether you're going to scream or invite them in. He looked familiar somehow, like someone he'd passed on the street but never bothered to talk to. And as the minutes ticked by, Travis tried to remember who he was. All at once, he got it. He'd never met the guy in person, only talked to him on the phone a few times, but the police had shown him a picture from a recent speaking engagement at one of the colleges in the area. He looked different in his fresh flat top and charcoal suit, but the look on his face was an exact match. It was a look that said he was surprised to be here, but pleasantly so, and he was just waiting for someone to throw him out. It was the writer, or what was left of him. Before Travis could call to him, he backed away slowly, each step seeming like a cartoon skit. Before he stepped back into the woods, he tipped Travis a wink, and even from the porch, that wink was icy. It said that it was okay. They'd meet some other time. He'd see him again. It was just a matter of time, after all. Travis wasted no time in getting in his truck and leaving down the mountain. He would drop this journal off to the cops so they could start searching the woods again. He might stop at Roy Miller's Realty and tell him how he wanted this cabin on the market yesterday so he never had to come up here again. Hell, he might even stop at that new clinic in town, Dr. Winter's Forgetful Something, and see if they had any appointments available. Travis never wanted to think about what he read again, and he would never set foot in that cabin again for the rest of his life. I'm standing on the International Space Station's revolving deck as I write this to no one in particular. Every 30 seconds, it rotates around so you can see the Earth as it hangs in space. I was entranced by the calm little ball of water and dirt from the first time I saw it. It's so easy to forget how chaotic it is down there. From the cold and silent reaches of space, you forget that the Earth is full of honking horns and screaming people. It's so easy to forget that terror exists in places other than Earth. I was honored, thrilled even, when they told me I had been selected to reside on the International Space Station. I'd been dreaming of space since I was a little kid. Like many kids my age, I had decided that I wanted to be an astronaut. Unlike many kids my age, though, I meant it. Every class, every grade, every extracurricular, and every internship had been tailored to get me to this point in my life. Every move I had ever made had brought me to this point, standing on the rotating viewing platform so I can watch the Earth circle around. At least, I could until about 8 hours ago. I awoke at 6 a.m., International Space Station time, as I do every day. I took my morning shower, made my first cup of coffee of the day, and walked into my kitchenette to make my breakfast. Then I took my breakfast to the rotating platform so I could eat it as I watched the Earth roll lazily by. But when I came to the platform that morning, I was in for a surprise. As I glanced out of the thick glass window, I was greeted with nothing. I could see a few satellites drifting lazily through the inky vortex. I could see the usual collection of debris just waiting to burn up in Earth's atmosphere. I could see the stars as they twinkled in the darkness of space. I could see the other planets as they winked further from the station. What I could not see was Earth. I can still see my broken coffee cup as it spreads its liquid across the floor. My overturned bowl of oatmeal is sitting near it. I'm standing not 10 feet away from the place I stood when I discovered there was no Earth. As I sit writing, I can hear the sounds of chaos that have invaded my once peaceful haven. The crew is going mad, running rampant with panic. They now know what it must feel like to be a newborn who's been clipped from his umbilicus. Hal laughed when I told him what I had seen. Hal is the communications officer for the station, and he thought I was joking with him. When it became clear that I wasn't joking, he tried to hail the command center in California, just to put my mind at ease. They would pick up, and I would see that the whole thing was just a big misunderstanding. When they didn't answer, he seemed unsure, but not alarmed. "That's just interference. I'll try the center in Florida," he said with a little laugh. No answer. He tried to hail system control in 5 different countries. No answer. We attempted to contact anyone within the sound of our voice, and also received no answer. Only then did he come to the observation deck with me and verify that there was no Earth. Someone's crying. I can hear them sobbing from the crew quarters as I sit and stare into the void. There were a lot of people mourning when the Earth disappeared. When I left my room and walked out here, I could see the signs of suicide as well. Ravita, one of our science team members, was lying on her bed as I walked by. The door was open, and she looked so peaceful as she lay there. Still, I knew she must be dead. A line of foam slid from the corner of her mouth, and her chest moved not at all. Others had hung themselves. You could see them hanging like strange wind chimes from the vents in their rooms. There were no firearms on the station, but I could hear the research lab table saw running full blast, and I could guess what sort of business it was doing. Others were using this as an excuse for bad behavior. The mess hall was full of people, eating the food stores and drinking what little alcohol we had available on the station. I was sure a certain amount of rape and murder were going on as well. As I stood there stargazing, though, it hardly seemed to matter. Very little matters now. We are adrift, our umbilicus cut, and we're all living on borrowed time. The air would cycle through the air handlers indefinitely. That was a given. But without food and water, we would die. Our food comes on a shuttle from Earth once a month. We were not equipped to grow our own food. No seeds, very little soil on board. Once our food is gone, we will starve. At the rate we were eating the food in the mess hall, we'd be lucky to have food for the week. I put a hand against the glass, momentarily dizzy. I see the red handprint left behind and know I have to finish writing this quickly. They've left me alone for now, but if the puddle of blood oozing into my chair is any indication, I don't have very long. Hal and I took our findings to the head researcher. Vaughn looked over the numbers, checked the data, and then came with us to the observation deck to see for himself. By this point, several of the researchers and the other station staff had gathered to look out into space, hoping to find that familiar blue orb we all loved so much. When they saw him, they all came to Vlan for answers. Vlan was stoic in the face of their fear, answering their questions evenly and putting their minds at ease. I'd known Vlan for years, an Israeli native drifting towards old age, and I had never seen him lose his cool. He didn't start now. "I don't know what has happened, but I think what is important is that we not panic. We were hand-picked for this mission, and we must act like we deserve to be here. Go about your duties as you would any other day. When news surfaces, I will let everyone know." He called a meeting with Boggs, head of security, Mortimer, director of operations, Charlie, Hal, and myself. Charlie was my boss, the head researcher under Vlan, and very, very British. "I believe the most important thing here is to maintain order. We have around 100 people on board, men and women, and if anarchy breaks out, then we may never over this." "Over this?" Mortimer asked skeptically. "Pull your head out of your ass, Charles. The Earth is gone." "We don't know that," Charles stated, wiping his bald head with a handkerchief. "I've got eyes, same as you, and they tell me the Earth is not where it's supposed to be. Now, either we've drifted, or we aren't where we're supposed to be, or—" "Oh, don't pretend you know a damn thing about what's going on here," Charles shot back hotly. "We pay you and your wrench jockeys to fix the air handlers, keep the pneumatic doors running, and maintain the systems on the station. You're no astronomer, Mortimer, not by a long shot." Mortimer turned red as he stepped closer to the blustery Englishman. Mortimer was no egghead, that was for certain, but he had served in 2 wars and was the most exceptional nuclear submarine tech the program could have laid hands on. He was also a bristling mass of service tattoos and sculpted muscle. I had seen him working out in the gym, giving the heavy bag a run for its money daily. Charles was about to learn what that bag knew for a certainty. "Just because I didn't go to some fancy university doesn't mean I'm country dumb, you little insect." "Gentlemen, please," Vlan shouted, bringing the two back to their senses. "We have a problem, and your fighting is not helping. We have not drifted. Our telemetry tells us that we are occupying the same position in space that we've been holding since the beginning. We have not moved, unless our telemetry is wrong." "It's not," Charles said smugly. "Then something has happened to the Earth. It's our job to keep the peace, Mortimer. Tell your people to go about their tasks as they would. Boggs, tell your security staff to maintain order and not get too excited. I don't want public hangings, but I do want to see malcontents going to the brig. Charles, keep your people on task and keep their minds occupied. Maybe you could push forward our agricultural programs for the time being. Food may become a priority." "Dismissed." He may have dismissed them, but their animosity remained. For the next few hours, tensions slowly built between the science team and the maintenance team. Mortimer could be seen talking to his crew, casting dark looks at anyone from the science team that got too close. The talk was loud and angry, and many of Boggs' security crew would also be seen in these discussions. Boggs seemed to share Mortimer's outlook on the current situation. The two were soldiers, after all, and saw us as little more than egghead civilians who thought too much of themselves. Charles was just as bad. He sealed off the science lab and put us to work on greenhouse projects. He stormed around like a rat in a cage, snapping at people for no reason, and confiding to his group of favorites about the stupid roughnecks who thought they were better than us. He kept looking towards the door fervently, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. Boggs had an override key to all the doors on the station, and if those roughnecks decided that they wanted into the lab, there wasn't a goddamn thing we could do about it. At 10:30, Vlan called Charles. The two had a very heated discussion, as quietly as possible, of course, but it was evident that something was going on. Charles turned pale towards the end, and his eyes kept slipping back to the door. He was afraid of something out there, more fearful than I'd ever seen him. When the phone suddenly went dead, he put it in the cradle with all the reverence of a casket going into the ground. They made their move around noon. We had heard some dissident noises from outside, but Charles wouldn't let us leave. He told us to keep working and never mind what we heard. The missing members were not commented on. They had never shown up this morning, but we all just kept doing our best. As the noises came closer, I saw many of the scientists looking anxiously at the door. We all glanced over when it opened, and our fear was realized. In walked 8 members of Boggs' security detail, followed by Mortimer and 8 of his maintenance crew. As I mentioned, there were no guns on the station, but they all had batons or wrenches or knives from the kitchen tucked into their belts. They blocked the door as they fanned out, and it was apparent what they intended to do. Charles was livid. "What are you about? We're performing serious work in here, so if you could just—" "By order of Overseer Boggs, we are taking the science team into custody," Mortimer announced, a huge grin spreading across his face. "Overseer? Vlan will have something to say about this. When I tell him what you've done, he'll—" But as he approached Mortimer, the big man swung a monkey wrench he'd had in his hand and scattered Charles's teeth and blood across the lab. Charles fell like a sack of oats, and pandemonium ensued. We all broke, making for the door and hitting the wall of guards. I don't remember how I got away. All I remember was a brilliant flash of pain in my side, and someone bumped me hard. Suddenly I was in the hall, running for Vlan's quarters. The corridor rang with screams and noise. People were running as other science teams were being rounded up by security staff. As I ran, dodging groups of security staff as they chased others, I was aware again of the pain in my abdomen. That's when I looked down and saw the handle sticking out of my side. The blade it was attached to was long and sharp, a kitchen knife used for boning fish. When I pulled it out, it was red with my blood, and the blood wasted little time in dribbling out of a new hole. I shrugged out of my lab coat and tried to tie it off like a tourniquet, but it did little more than give the blood something new to stain. I felt a little dizzy. I wanted to sit down, but I knew this was the wrong time to do it. I kept going, hoping Vlan would bring peace to the station, but I already feared what I would find when I got to his office. I didn't even have to go in to see what they'd done to him. He was slumped over his desk in a pool of his own blood. Someone, probably Boggs, had cut his throat for him and left him where he lay. I turned to go, and at that minute, I think I was already planning on coming here to die. I dropped the knife on the floor and walked unnoticed through the hall. I saw bodies, I heard the screams, but I was ambivalent to them, as I was to the vacuum outside. I couldn't help them, and they couldn't save me, so what was the point of belaying the inevitable? My eyesight is getting foggy now. I think I came here hoping to see Earth blink back into existence before I die. I don't know if I really was or not, but it would make me feel better to know that there still is an Earth out there. As chaotic as those billions of humans are, I don't think I want the few of us still alive here to be what my species will be judged by. They've proven that humanity, even the best of humanity, will revert back to apes at a moment's notice. Survival of the fittest, even in space, is not a hallmark I want on display, but it seems to be what this station's history will be left with. I'm going to sleep now. My fingers are numb. The rest seems like a good idea. If this is truly my final message, then take some solace in knowing that I died doing what I loved. I died among the stars, hoping for hope for the Earth and its people.